When I approach this subject of grandparenting, parenting through doubt and faith, I'm thinking first of all about my own experience. And so I grew up in a home with multiple divorces. Each of my parents have been married 3 times. And our family system, worked hard to try to love each other. And we just had a hard time of it. And part of our family, when I was with one side of the family, um, every other weekend, I was in a side of the family that had nothing to do with God. If it certainly not anything to do with institutional church, and the suspicion was really the feeling of that side of the family when it came to the things of God. And then when I was in a home during the week, I was in a religious home who went to church more than once a week, and there was a part of that. And that kind of whiplash wasn't easy to navigate, to figure out my own faith, my own ideas about who God was. And decades later, I wasn't able to stop that cycle. So decades later, my marriage of 15 years ended. My kids lived with me from that point on. And then my kids have had to walk the plank that I did between a home that was at the time countering the things of Jesus, and then a pastor's home trying to follow the things of Jesus. And just so many of us and those we know have had to walk through what are already mysterious questions, but then with sort of the stability moved out from underneath us. And you throw in some doses of pain that a number of us have experienced, and the whole question about God can be so important and yet can seem impossible. And so when I approach this subject today, I'm coming from that experience, and I'm also thinking about myself as being more naive and foolish than I wish, and more broken than I want to be, more cynical than I want to be. And so I don't come at these questions as an expert. I come at them from someone who's inside of it, trying to find my way through. And as my young and grown kids grapple with the things of Jesus, and as I do as well. 2 things to know. One, I do have a point of view, like all of us do. So for me, it's Jesus. Jesus, as the Bible presents him, is the conversation partner for me in life. He's the compass. He's the one I'm trying to quote, learn the teachings of. If it's his podcasts I'm listening to, it's the articles he writes. That's who I'm scrolling his feed. That's what I'm trying to get to. And so that doesn't mean you have to come from that point of view, but I just want you to know that's where I'm coming from. And I'm in a process of trying to find him and the wisdom point of view that foreshadows him in the Bible. So that's where we're kind of coming from. And even saying the word Bible can be frightening or triggering, and I'm aware of that. So this is where I'm coming from. My family background and Jesus is my point of view. So with that in mind, my thought here is how would we find a wiser way to give a reason for our hope? This reason for our hope language comes from the earliest Christians. One of the insiders who knew Jesus best, he talked to early Christians about giving a reason for our hope. And I'm just attaching this word wisdom to it. How would we find a wiser way to give a reason for our hope? And I'm going to just use this acronym. It can feel trite to use an acronym. Each word stands for a sentence. But sometimes when everything is emotionally going on and you're grappling with questions, especially with people that you love and care about, and everything is speeding up, sometimes for me it's helpful to have an acronym, Sage Hope, because then I can start with the first letter. Okay, what is that? Slow down. And work my way through. So I'm going to share that with you this morning. All right. So let's imagine a family. And the family is finally had a night to themselves. And they got pizza, and they're watching a show on television. and it's relaxing. And in the course of the television show that they're watching, there's a Christian character in the story, and there's a lesbian character in the story. And you kind of like the lesbian character in the story. You're kind of not sure about the Christian character in the story. And then somewhere along the line in the dialogue, the Christian character says to the lesbian character in the story on television, "You're going to hell." And at that moment, one of the teenage kids in the family, she stands up and she hits the pause button. And she turns to her parents and she says, "Is that what our church believes?" And then a son, you can imagine if the scenario, the younger brother stands up, "Yeah. Is that what our church is about?" Now, mom and dad they got pepperoni right there in the, finishing the pepperoni chewing there. And all of a sudden, what was supposed to be just a relaxing family night has turned into a moment of asking among the hardest questions of our generation. And the layers are palpable, right? Number one, this isn't the headspace mom and dad were in. They're now wondering, why did we pick this show? Number two, the question being asked is honest, earnest, and it can't be sorted out in 2 minutes. Is this what our church is about? What's the this? Is it the unlikability of the Christian character? Is it the way the Christian character is relating to the gay character? Is it the idea of hell in itself? What is the this in that moment? The parents see the earnestness in their daughter and their son's eyes. They don't want to answer poorly. They don't want their kids to think badly of their church. They don't want their kids to feel that they're just thinking they're going to fail. Like all of a sudden, all of that, will they still follow God after I answer this question and finish chewing my pepperoni pizza? Like all of that is right in there. And all they wanted was a night. Things had been so busy, but there they all are. And that kind of moment doesn't just happen in living rooms with, junior and high school kinds of kids. Fast forward, it's Christmas, and the grown adult kids are coming back for Christmas with the grandkids, and grandma asks an honest, seemingly harmless question, will you go to church with me? It's Christmas. Can we go to church together? And then all of a sudden, as the grown adult child says no, and that means grandkids aren't going either, now all of a sudden, everyone's trying to figure out how to talk about why they wouldn't go to church, which leads them to all these other questions. And again, it's not in a conference like this, it's in your living room in a moment in the real world. And so that's not a debate stage. That's not a book with 10 steps. That's the people you love most in the world and the relational desire that you have for them. I know one of the things I noticed growing up in my life was that the folks who left church and walked away from Jesus, those folks didn't suddenly have a download of relational know-how. They continued to wreck each other, though they didn't want to. And then those who were at church who could quote the Bible, they didn't fare any better. And then I have an MDiv, which is called a Master of Divinity. I have mastered divinity. And I have a PhD, and I'm a divorced man. It's not like our Bible quoting, solves or helps. And it's not like our resistance to Bible quoting, our Bible bashing. It's not like that solves or helps. Something's needed, and I'm just thinking it's wisdom. And that's what I'm searching for. So when you start to look at Jesus and what he says about wisdom, or the wisdom tradition that Jesus finds himself in, locates himself in the Bible, this is a way to summarize it. And the first is slow down. Slow down. When you read wisdom, you'll read things like this. Finishing a thing is better than starting it. Patience is better than pride. In other words, take a long view. Our life stories have many chapters. It's often the case that the scene we're in isn't the last one of the story. Jesus tells a story about a farmer, and the farmer invites two others to come help in the field. And one of the sons says, yes, and the other of the kids says, no. The one who said yes never shows up, and the one who said no shows up. Slow down, because the immediate moment isn't what defines how everything will turn out there. And so the way wisdom talks about this, the earliest Christians meditating on Jesus, they just said this: we want to learn to be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger, quick to listen. We slow down our talk. This means we don't say the first thing that comes to our mind, even if it's true. We stay slow. This means someone gets to experience. Can you imagine that? If someone was slow to speak with you because they were quick to listen, that means that you're not interrupted, you're not exaggerated, you're not minimized, you're completely heard. Wouldn't that be something? And then slow to vent anger. That means someone's not bringing their internal mood on you. They're not shutting you down. They're not projecting onto you conclusions and motives you don't know yourself to have. They're staying slow internally with the reactions that's going on there, so that they can listen well. That same Christian, James, he goes on to say that wisdom is peaceable, meaning someone's not hostile or reactive. Someone's a genuine enjoyer of your presence. They're gentle, someone kind to you, not abrasive, considerate, even if you aren't. Isn't that amazing? And open to reason. Someone teachable, willing to yield, not defensive, a listener, conceding truth no matter whose lips utter it, even when passionately differing with you. Open to reason. This makes sense because the Jesus they followed, I think, he was saying, let's be asking. Let's be asking. Let's be seeking. Let's be knocking. And that asking means it's something that you don't have, or an answer that you don't have but wish you did. And you give voice to that and you ask. Seeking is the thing you're desiring and the path you're choosing to get it. And knocking is this idea of a closed door that you wished was open, but it's not. A closed door you wish was open, but it's not. And that means everything is slowed down. So you could imagine in some kind of, way, as you finish chewing your pepperoni pizza there, you say to Jaden and Ella, you say to them in your living room, this is an amazing and challenging question that you've asked about our church. I feel grateful to see how active your mind is as it relates to trying to make sense of God. We want that too. We want our family to be a place we can talk about real things just like this, as well as enjoy television shows. I have to admit, my head's not quite here. I wonder, would you mind asking your question again? I just want to set my pizza down. I really want to make sure I hear you. Could you share again what's on your heart? Slowing it down in some way The earliest Christians just said it this way: anger doesn't bring about the kingdom of God. I was thinking about when one of my kids, a couple of our kids, have grappled with Jesus, God, walked away, not believed, things like that. And I was thinking about the first time that happened and grappling with how to deal with that. And I kept thinking about my papa, my grandfather, who had walked away from God all those years ago. And it was after 50 years of Mama's prayers. You know, my papa was in his 70s when he turned to the Lord. And of course, as I grew older, I learned about my great-grandma who had prayed for my papa. I don't know what that feels like to you. Maybe if you're not a Christian, that's what I'm describing is, I don't know what that might feel like. But from my point of view, as I was thinking about my child who was walking away from God, and whatever my own contributions to that were, I took hope in thinking about Papa in his 70s. His mom never saw him turn back to Jesus. And I said I would like to see that, but I don't have to. You know, I don't have to. And then as a Christian might pray, oh Lord, and asking, slowing down, taking a long view. And some of you are in the middle chapters there, adult kids who are in their 40s or older and wondering. But wisdom slows it down. Speeding up doesn't help, does it? You could imagine how that could go in that moment with the pizza. This isn't the time or place. Or you could be offended that a question was being asked. You could be offended that thinking it's disrespectful to ask a question, something like that, and you could shut it down. And you could shut it down in the name of God, which would only prove the point. So wisdom slows down, and we need help for that. I don't know who naturally slows down. And then we slow down, and now we ask questions. We ask questions. The wise say it this way: if one gives an answer before he hears, it's his folly and shame. If one gives an answer before he hears, it's his folly and shame. The heart of a righteous person ponders how to answer. The heart of a righteous person ponders how to answer. Well, our first question when we're asking questions is internally to God. It might be just this: help. You're chewing pepperoni, but internally, help me, help me, help me. If you call out for insight, this is how the wise say it. If you raise your voice for understanding, you seek it like silver, search for it, then you will understand, for the Lord gives wisdom. Lord, help me listen. Lord, show me what to ask. And we ask questions of curiosity. You know, there are questions designed to trap. There are questions designed to say, gotcha. But in those Christmas or family movie night living room moments, we don't appreciate those kinds of questions, do we? The question is, before I can answer, I need to hear what's really going on. This is something about Jesus. After 3 days, when he was a boy, it says, they found him. He was around 12 years old. He was sitting among the teachers, listening to them and asking them questions. As a matter of fact, Jesus was a question asker all his life. As you read the gospel accounts of Jesus, those historical accounts of him, what you realize is that Jesus almost never answered a question with a statement. He almost always responds with a question. There's a follow-up. So it could sound like this: can you tell me more? I can see your passion. What causes you to feel so strongly about this? Can you help me understand what you mean? Sometimes when people talk like this, they have this in mind. Other people have that in mind. How about you? Is that what you have in mind, or is it something different? What experiences are leading you to feel this way? Am I hearing you right? Just a question. It slows down, quick to listen, slow to speak, slowing down, and then trying to learn what is going on rather than assuming this. So it might sound something like this, with the TV on pause and the pepperoni pizza. That's not what our church believes. So then we say, that's a great question, Jaden. Can you help me understand a bit more by what you mean by that's not what our church believes? Is there something that you hope that our church does believe? Well, I hope our church doesn't believe that someone goes to hell just because they're a lesbian. Yes, okay. It sounds to me like you're feeling that a lesbian going to hell just because of her sexual identity doesn't seem fair. Am I hearing you right? Absolutely. What kind of a God judges someone like that? I mean, with all the evil going on in the world, how is it that this nice person would be treated like that just because of sex? Is there any kind of person that you think it would be fair of God to judge? Well, if there is a hell, I think it would be for the really bad people, like serial killers or people who harm children. Okay, if I'm hearing you right, you're not opposed to the idea that God might judge someone for bad things, but sexuality isn't a bad thing, and you're thinking, how could that ever be judged? Is that what you're saying? Right. I'm saying sexuality isn't a bad thing. It's good. I'm not saying that a person should never be judged. A person can be a bad person. I can see that, but not this. What's happening is you're having a conversation. You're asking questions, and you're trying to learn. The Proverbs say it this way: a fool takes no pleasure in understanding, but only in expressing his own opinion. I've been a fool. I'll read it again. A fool takes no pleasure in understanding. That is, there's no delight. Doesn't find it lovely or enjoyable to know your mind, but only in expressing his own opinion. I was recently in a situation where I just blew all that. I handled all this so poorly. I've learned over some time here that a check engine light for me is if I'm not asking questions. If I start to speed up, I'm just making statements with someone. That's a, Mayday, Mayday, code red, and then I end up finding myself having to ask forgiveness. Because I'm drawing someone out to logical conclusions that I think I can see, but they themselves aren't saying that. So I'm putting something on them that they themselves don't know themselves to say. Now maybe there actually is an inconsistency there, but it's much more helpful if someone can discover that for themselves in the context of being heard. I'm asking God these days, help me enjoy other people. Help me not just try to love them, but to enjoy them, to take pleasure in understanding them. I've been such a fool, Lord, help me. We're slowing down, we're asking questions, we're gleaning the heart behind the questions. This word glean, I needed something for sage hope, but glean is also has a slowness to it. It means you're gathering up, you're gradually gathering something. You're gradually putting together these puzzle pieces. Sometimes a person's asking a question to trap you from a hard heart. But sometimes a person's asking a hard question from a genuine place. They really want to know. And discerning the difference. Jesus, when he relates to people, it's really something he relates differently according to who he's dealing with. So he's in a conversation with this woman by a well, She asks earnest questions. They talk about all kinds of stuff. They talk about her whole romantic past. They talk about her views on worship and God, and they talk about their ethnic differences. It's just, wow, what a conversation. But then if Jesus is with this lawyer who just wants to justify himself, it's a sparse email. Jesus just like asks him a question. When the man answers, Jesus says, sounds good, go do that. The man says, but. Jesus tells him a story, asks a question. The man answers. Jesus says, sounds good, go do that. Nothing about their past or their views of God and all of this rich conversation. None of that. Why? Because the guy's trying to justify himself. This is not a genuine interaction. The Lord Jesus is still present. And then there's these folks where Jesus just says, woe to you. Well, and those folks are trying to kill him. Their questions aren't real. But Jesus never says, woe to you to the woman at the well. He sees who's in front of him, and he relates accordingly. Whew, I need all kinds of help with that, especially with pizza and a television show. But here's the one thing I'd want to say if you're in that situation. Number one, younger kids especially will not often go to their parents with their deepest questions. So if that's happening to you, wow. Wow. Because usually they're going to Siri, the internet, or to their friends. So if that question's actually coming to you, that's amazing. They're including you still in their wisdom search, and they're looking to you with their questions. The second thing is, in a scenario like that, those kids, Jaden and Ella, they weren't just watching entertainment. They're awake to the world. They saw something on that television show. It made them think about their real lives, their real church, their real parents, their real friends. And they stopped the entertainment, set that aside, and went to the real stuff of life. Are you kidding me? If you got a 16-year-old and a 12-year-old in your house doing something like that, that is amazing. It's amazing. Pray that it always would be that way. So that at Christmas, when they're 40, and they're saying, not even for mom at Christmas will they go to church. There's a whole history here of the ability to slow down, ask questions, and glean the heart behind the question. And as we're trying to recognize the heart behind the question, we want to embrace anything that's true. Just anything true that we can. It's a remarkable thing that Jesus would affirm. He would name the things that are true and noble and good and right, even of people who differed with him. The earliest Christians would, when they talked about love for a neighbor and love for God, they said this: love rejoices in the truth. It rejoices in anything true. Sometimes it's easy to get locked in on our child or grandchild or niece or nephew or loved one, and it's easy to only see what they doubt and to only see what they question. And they shrink in our eyes, and we no longer see the whole person with who they are. In this case, if they're standing for justice, if they're believing people ought not be treated that way, if they're believing that people aren't to be demeaned in some way, then we want to say, thanks be to God, our kids care for other people. And we want to affirm that. There's a moment when a woman busts into a party. It's a party of God talkers like me, and she's more awesome than them. She has had quite a past, but she comes in because she knows Jesus is there, And she just falls at his feet, and her tears are just falling on his bare feet, and she's wiping his feet with her hair. And the God talkers like me are all upset about it because they had this party for Jesus in mind, not for her. And then they say this: if he knew what sort of woman this was, he wouldn't allow it. And Jesus doesn't care much for that kind of talk. So he tells a story which must have infuriated those well-educated adults. And Jesus said this. He asks a question. And the question to them is this: do you see this woman? Do you see this woman? And then he names everything about her that he commends. I entered your house. You gave me no water for my feet. She, with her tears, has washed my feet and wiped them with her hair. You gave me no kiss of greeting the way they would have done in that culture. She hasn't stopped kissing my feet since I came in. You didn't anoint my head with olive oil. She has anointed my feet with perfume. He gets to the part that's wrong in her life. Her sins are many, and they are forgiven. Go and sin no more. It's not that Jesus didn't see the thing that caused the God talkers to say the sort. Of course he saw that. He just saw the woman. There's so much more to her than that. He dealt with that. But he didn't shrink the woman to do it. He continued to embrace anything true that he can. And now we're on the lookout for Jesus. I'll just say it this way. It could be personally, you're thinking to yourself, does Jesus say anything about this? Whatever this thing is at Thanksgiving or Christmas that the adult kids are bringing up, politics or whatever it is, does Jesus say anything about this? And that's personal to you. It could be you're not saying that out loud, but it sends you back to the Gospels. And it sends you back to the earliest Christians. Have they talked about this thing? If you're in a situation in which the family would allow it, you could ask, could we look at what Jesus has to say together? I'm not remembering. I don't know, but I want to learn. If it feels like it could be received, you could say, there's a story Jesus tells. It's coming to my mind. May I share it? But there's an interesting thing. In our cultural moment, most folks will say you do you. A lot of people will say do you. You can have your own story and your own point of view. Some people quote the Scientific American. Some people quote Wired or Rolling Stone. You happen to quote Jesus. You have a point of view. And it's surprising sometimes that followers of Jesus enter these questions and things without referencing him. We slow down, we're asking questions, we're gleaning the heart behind the question, we're embracing anything true that we can, and we're on the lookout for Jesus. Where is Jesus in relation to this thing that we're working through? He's the one that holds all things together. He's the way, the truth, and the life. How can we do this? We're just asking questions. Did Jesus say anything about these questions of sexuality, hell, judgment, hypocrisy, the way people are to be treated? Does Jesus do anything in relationship to these questions? We can just say, I want to take a bit of time now. I think I'm hearing you. I can see how important this is. I have some things to think about and to look for what Jesus might have to say. You might even think to yourself, if Jesus was in that scene with all of those people, how might he interact with all of them? Would he have the same reaction that we are? And how would I know? And of course, we have to be clear about the Jesus that we mean, because there are culturally conservative versions of Jesus out there. and culturally progressive versions of Jesus out there, and spiritual but not religious buffet-style versions of Jesus out there. And there are secular versions of Jesus out there. So which is the Jesus we're talking about? And now we're slowing down again, asking questions, cleaning the heart, embracing what's true, because we're looking for Jesus. Now, observing blind spots is just pointing out where the tensions are in what someone's saying, the inconsistencies, the thing that's wrong. The fact that it could be in a situation that the kids pop up, hit pause, and then they're really intense and judging the parents and the church in the name of not judging people. Really offended to see the Christian character in the story judge and treat poorly the gay character, and on the basis of that then treats mom and dad poorly, judges them, and does the very thing they protest. Now all of us do that, doing the thing we protest. And it's a blind spot. And the different way is quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. And we're seeking that way. The problem is that most of us, if you're in a Christian environment, particularly a Bible-believing environment, if you talk about apologetics or you talk about answering questions, most of us are taught to start right here, observe blind spots. You start with the O. There's nothing else following, and there's nothing that precedes it. That might work on a debate stage for a moment. It does not work in a living room with pepperoni pizza and your own kids are asking the questions of their generation. And it isn't wise. Before we get to O, observing the blind spots, we have slowed down, we have asked questions, we've gleaned the heart behind the question, we're embracing everything true that we can, we're on the lookout for Jesus, and what we've just done is tried, in Jesus' words, to remove a log out of our own eye before we propose to take a speck out of another's eye. This is how Jesus speaks of it. And so by the time we get to this point, someone says, there just is no truth. And we know that's a self-refuting statement because they just made the statement that it's true, that there is no truth, right? Which brings us back to square one together. The fact that we know that's a self-refuting statement, how does that help? At Christmas, when mom just wanted her adult kid to go to church. How does knowing the self-refuting statement solve it? So there's more to go. Here we are picturing a scene, picturing God. One of the things on the observing blind spots part is that we will, you end up thinking about the way of thinking about something and how someone's way of thinking can be off. And our way of thinking can be off. And we're thinking together to get our view of the world aligning with what's true. But a lot of times the problem is the picture behind the thinking. I'll say it this way as we begin to close. Imagine a sixth grader goes to a youth camp here at Riverside and goes to youth camp, a Christian, comes back from Riverside's youth camp an atheist. As a team and as a family, we're scratching our head. That's not our desire, that our kids would go to camp and come back not believing in God. That's not what a church hopes for. As we sit in the living room and eat cookies that Jessica makes and we talk about these questions, the sixth grader is telling us that God is irrelevant. Science has proved the irrelevance of God. And God is irrelevant. We can talk about how Christians are scientists too, We can talk about particular arguments regarding science, faith, relevance, etc. She says everything's random. You can't really know anything anyway. We can talk about epistemology. How do you know you like chocolate? Is that something you can scientifically verify? We can do that. But really, the thing is how she pictures God. Underneath all that is a picture of God as an old man who doesn't know how to use an iPad. And the stuff that's going on in her life and in her family, that's what help is that? And so, what if we say something like this after we've gotten to this point and we're just skipping the blind spots for the moment and going right to picturing God? And what if we're saying, what if God is like a baker who knows how to make the best chocolate cookies and is so thoroughly familiar with chocolate and all the variations of it that he just delights making it. And he loves when people love chocolate. Or what if God is a scientist who loves observing every created thing? He loves it so much that he just gives his gaze to it. And he not only looks at it, he delights in it. What if God is the one who created everything we look at and everything we enjoy? And in this particular case, this person loved fashion of a particular kind. So I just said, what if God loves color and design? What if God is like a designer of fashion, loves to piece together and loves what you're creating? In that moment, we're not arguing ideas so much. We're looking at how someone imagines who God might be. And in order for the arguments to make sense, the imagined picture first has to change. Because as long as God doesn't know how to use an iPad, all of our arguments won't make any sense. It won't be until she can imagine that God loves chocolate, creates design and fashion, and loves this world that he made, that maybe we can then begin to talk coherently about epistemology with a God like that. Because as long as God doesn't use an iPad, what's the point of bringing him into the question about science and epistemology? We picture God, and finally, we embody the love we speak of. Jesus is so lovely. And the people who experienced him experienced love like they hadn't known before, even when he challenged them. And I think, as we've thought about our kids who doubt and question and haven't believed in God, the thing that hits us is this: they're still living with Christians. So at Christmas, they're there in a home, not going to church, but they're in a home with Christians. And the grandkids are in a Christian's house. And so whatever memes and whatever experiences out here they've had with Christians and Christianity, they keep bumping up into you. They keep bumping into you. A real, live, living follower of Jesus who loves them. And the experience of the disposition of Jesus toward them, who has always slowed down with us, asked us questions, discerned our heart, embraced everything true about us that he can. He has always put himself center in our life. As he's pointed out our blind spots, he has pictured the grace of God for us in the context of his love. And as Christian people experience that, sometimes think of it this way: it's like 85% of the answer. Jesus said it this way: How will you know if you're in the presence of a Christian? It's by the way they love. And do we hope that in the course of many chapters over a long story, that love will win out? We don't do it because it might work, because it might not. We do it because it's love. And that's where Jesus leads us. Sometimes we have a hard time with that love part because of belief. We start with the question, but what do they believe? My grandkids or my kids, they don't believe right. I just want to say this. What if, you can disagree with me, what if the first question we ask isn't, what do they believe? I'm following an African theologian named Augustine. And Augustine said this: when there is a question as to whether a man is good, one does not ask what he believes or what he hopes, but what he loves. Why is that? Because the man who does not love believes in vain, even though his beliefs are true, and hopes in vain, even though the objects of his hope are a real part of true happiness. For it may yet happen that a man does not love that which is necessary to the attainment of his hope. The person wants to play piano. They get a piano, they buy the piano book, they sign up for lessons, but they don't love the change in their day that practicing the piano will require of them. They hope to play the piano, but they do not love to play the piano. And therefore the piano sits unplayed. The earliest Christians said, if we can speak and we know all theology and everything else, but we don't love, we have nothing. Think of it this way. There are three great things Christians say in the whole universe: faith, hope, and love. And the greatest of these is faith. Nope. It's not less than faith. Without faith, it's impossible to please God. But if faith, hope, and love have to line up, we keep trying to put faith in first place, and the Christians keep putting faith in third or second. Because love has to lead the line. And so sometimes, if you're thinking about your nieces and nephews, your kids and grandkids, you're wanting to say, what do they believe? And go right to that O. And it's not less than that. We need to do that. But what if the question first is, what do they love? What do they love? And Mom, they love you. That's why they're there at Christmas with you. They don't love church. Start with where they love. And remember, as they talk to you, they're talking to someone who loves Jesus. Over the long haul, sage hope is what we're trying to find. Each of these letters could be their own session. But hopefully we're hinting enough at a way forward together. Let's pray. Lord, some of us feel comfortable praying and others of us don't. And you know that. I just ask that you would help us, that you would orient us to you and your wisdom, that we might learn to slow down and ask these questions and discern the heart. But most of all, maybe that you would help us realize this is how you have related to us. You have been so gracious, so kind, so forthright, so intentional with all of our own questions and doubts. We marvel at you and we praise you. I do. In Jesus, it's in your name. Amen.